At the legal angle to all of this, it's been a long, winding battle, it would seem. Some say it's even less at this point. But let's get the thoughts of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, who joins us virtually on the program. Good morning, Mr. Falana. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
I know you've been following this, perhaps impacted as well, in terms of the aviation sector, power. Even the judiciary, we understand, has been affected by all of this. The federal government called Labour back, and they had some sort of negotiation yesterday. They came out with an agreement. How much or how far do you see that agreement pushing the needle, at least in favor of a resolution?
I have seen the document being paraded as an agreement. It is not an agreement, but an intention to agree on the national minimum wage. And what the government did yesterday was to say, yes, we are dropping the idea of giving you or paying you 47,000 naira. We are dropping the idea of even 50,000. We'll now go beyond.
Well, there you go. We'll, of course, get Mr. Falana back. He will just unmute, and then we'll continue with this conversation. Okay, please go ahead.
And the labor unions have not had an agreement. So there is a move, there is an offer by the government. And labor unions are going to meet this money to consider the agreement, I mean the understanding, i.e. the government is now prepared to offer more than 60,000. What do we do at this stage? And I think they will go back to their constituencies this morning and then decide on the way forward. There's not an agreement yet that will lead to immediate suspension or call off of the strike. That will have taken place in the night. But now they want to report back to the unions that declare the strike. That is my understanding.
Let's go back to, because sometimes I don't just like watching the end. I like to watch the process. One of the first shots that was fired before Labour embarked on this strike came from the Attorney General, citing a lot of, cases in the past and even dependency of that interim injunction. Literally looking like it is some way of saying you may bear the consequence of this action you're about to take. What do you make of the AGF's position in the midst of a negotiation?
Well, the labor unions, the two labor centers, sent the letter to me.
Over
the weekend. I received a copy of the letter, and my initial reaction was to ask the labor union, are you prepared for the strike? And they told me they were prepared. A strike in certain circumstances is like a coup. Once the coup succeeds, there's nothing you can do about it. But if it fails, the penalty is very clear. And that is why, in the understanding reached last night, there is a clause that nobody will be penalized as a result of this strike. Now, coming to the law, there is no court order today that relates to the ongoing strike. When the federal government went to court a few months ago, the issue of minimum wage was not on the table. So the court could not have anticipated that there would be a strike over the minimum wage. The labor leaders, neither Osifo nor Ijero, thought we will get to this level because the national minimum wage of 2019 has a 5-year lifespan. Section 3 of the law says this particular wage, national minimum wage, shall be paid for 5 years. So the National Minimum Wage Act, as I did point out yesterday, expired last month. Why did the government allow the expiration? So if the tripartite committee that was set up had concluded its work, by now the National Assembly should have enacted a new National Minimum Wage Act And this strike would have been unnecessary. So when you are talking about law, today there is no court order against this particular strike. Secondly, when the Lady Attorney General by giving a 15-day notice, again, as the labor leaders, this is what the government is saying. And they say, but you are our lawyers. Anytime we are giving the government notice, adequate notice, what has been the effect? They will rush to the National Industrial Court, get an ex parte order to restrain us from proceeding on strike. If we went on strike, we would then be accused of contempt of court. This was why this time around, we were mobilizing our members. Government knew we were mobilizing our members. At the end of the day, we said we were going on strike. So government didn't have the opportunity over the weekend to rush to the National Industrial Court. And for me, it's a lesson for the government that when next time the labor says we're going on strike, the government will have to rush back to the drawing table. And this could have happened over the weekend. Now let me also say furthermore, the penalty. I've looked at the law. I've looked at the Trade Union Act. I've looked at the provisions of the Trade Dispute Act. In the case of ASU and the federal government and ASU, the federal government dragged ASU to court during the last strike. And the President of the National Industrial Court, the Honorable Justice Benedict Kanye, ruled in line with Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act that if a worker goes on a strike in Nigeria, whether legal or illegal, as the government is saying, the penalty is the loss of your salary and allowances during the period of the strike. So all the government can say this time around, for those of you on strike, if the strike lasts 2-3 days or a week, you will not be paid your salary. That's what the law is saying. But the government has already captured that by saying, we're not going to penalize you for going on strike because it's a legitimate strike.
All right.
Because one, in line with Section 16 of the Constitution, this is the position of the law. Because you can't say you cannot go on strike at the same time you say I didn't give you a notice. If I cannot go on strike, why do I need to give you a notice then?
All right, Leonard Silk. All right, Leonard Silk. Still referring to the Attorney General's position, let's go back to the June 2015 agreement. In that 15-point agreement, there was a commitment by the federal government for the development of a new minimum wage within 1 month of the date of the signing of the agreement. But indeed, we have moved past that date. It's been 11 months, in fact, 1 year already. But in the last point of that agreement, which is number 15, it says the memorandum shall be filed with the relevant court of competent jurisdiction within 1 week as consent judgment by the federal government. What does this mean, Leonard Silk, for this current strike?
Not only the labor leaders, apart from the labor leaders, the lawyers also signed the agreement. The Honorable Attorney General endorsed the agreement. I endorsed the agreement on behalf of the labor unions. But we had already entered, we ought to have entered it into a judgment. But for reasons best known to the government, after we had signed, the government refused to have it listed so that the court will make it the final judgment. Again, as I said, the government was buying time to tie the hands of labor. Just like yesterday, we have this interim order that shall not go on strike. But that matter has ended. We are then ordered by that agreement conclude negotiations on the new national minimum wage. The government has, as usual, treated that provision
a very important aspect of the conversation.
with contempt, believing it will happen to us. And that is why you have this strike. The strike will have been unnecessary, totally unnecessary, if that agreement had been honored by the government.
So, Leonard Silk, should the federal government present this point in court, flowing from what the Attorney General has said about this strike being illegal, would Labour also be presenting the federal government's failure to commit to the other aspects of the agreement? And we've had cause to interview some Labour leaders in the very recent past who say that a number of items on this 15-point list, the federal government has failed to meet them.
You see, the government is advised to learn to comply with agreements, freely enter into, with labor unions, with ASU and others. The last strike back that lasted 8 months has to do with the failure of the government of Nigeria since about 2013 to comply with an agreement. So this time around, the government should draw some lesson from this unnecessary pain that this strike has caused the country and our people, and then speedily comply with all pending, all outstanding agreements with Labour, so that this will not be a recurring exercise. Workers are very reluctant to go on strike because it costs a lot to mobilize members, to get them prepared for a strike. In the middle of the strike, the government would then come in to show some good faith. An agreement is signed, and once the strike is called off, the government simply goes to sleep. I heard you earlier, some people cannot pay 30,000. I mean, this shouldn't be coming from the government, because that is an admission of illegality. The duty of the government is to enforce the law. And once you have a duty to enforce the law, you cannot come out and say, if we have a new agreement, if we have a new minimum wage act, some state governments will not pay. A government should not say that. To say some people are going to breach the law and we are going to allow them. No. Once a new agreement is codified, once a new agreement, a new minimum wage becomes the law of the country, right, the federal government has a duty, the Attorney General of the country has a duty to drag any state government that does not pay to court. I mean, the Attorney General just filed a new case, which is a good development, by saying over the years we have accused state governments of diverting money for local governments. The federal government has now gone to court because there is a crisis in town. So the government is compelled to go to the Supreme Court. Please, we want the state government to pay all the state local government accounts the money meant for local government, so that from there the money is then distributed to each of the local government and not cornered by some governors. So, and in this case again, if any state does not comply with the new minimum wage act, the federal government has a duty, the Attorney General has a duty to drag such a government to the National Industrial Court, because there are decisions to the effect.
Well, Mr. Falana,
the employer of labor must pay the prevailing minimum wage in the country, and that is the case of Apampa and your state government. So right. I don't see any argument in that.
Well, so let's just break it down. So on the one hand, states that are not paying the previous 30,000 naira are clearly breaking the law, and they are liable to any punishment that the Constitution or the courts decide on this one. That's on the one hand. I think that's...
Yes.
That's on the one hand, fantastic. On the second hand is this. I'd like to take you back to the 2000s. Then President Olusegun Obasanjo, there was a conversation around the new minimum wage, and it was sort of agreed upon. But what we had was the governor of Lagos at that time, who is now the president, Bola Tinubu, saying to President Olusegun Obasanjo then that you do not have a right to dictate to me what I will pay my workers because you did not engage them for me. And I imagine you remember that back and forth. And of course, that battle has lingered ever since. So did he have a right to say that under the Constitution at that point? Because some governors might also try to replay that script and say, well, federal government does not have a right because you didn't engage my workers for me. Mr. Falana.
Well, the then governor of Lagos State, incidentally the current president, was made to realize at that material time in the 20 assembly to prescribe, to enact a law for a new minimum wage. It's not one of those areas. It's not in the concurrent list. It is in the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution. So that argument was defeated then, and it is going to be defeated this time around if any state government raises the argument. And again, as I said repeatedly, the people are running the country now. We'll have to be prepared for governance. Even within the ambit of the...
Looks like the connection is playing a fast one on us this morning while we're discussing this.
In all capitalism, the United States of America,
Mr. Falana,
the United States of America.
Pardon me. So we lost a huge part of some of the points you were making. In fact, when you were speaking to what the former governor of Lagos State said then, and this point you were making, the connection froze on us. So if you could just, for the benefit of those who didn't get it, do a quick recap, please. I'm
submitting that when Governor, now President Bola Tinubu, made that point, it was pointed out to him that under the Constitution, trade union, labor matters are in the exclusive legislative list. Therefore, once the National Assembly enacts a minimum wage in the country, no state government, no employer of labor can say, oh, we are running a federalism, therefore I am going to pay what I like. And the then governor of Lagos State, now President Bola Tinubu, agree with the position of the law and ensure that Lagos State government paid the minimum wage prescribed by the National Assembly. The same argument any governor say this time around, we are not going to pay, will be confronted with the clear and unambiguous provision of the Constitution. That is the law in Nigeria. And again, as I said earlier, any state government or any employer of labor that does not pay the national minimum wage, we have agreed this time around. I'm talking of our law firm and the labor unions, and we're not going to allow non-payment of wages this time around. They will be dragged to court, and we're going to ensure that the law is complied with, including the fact that we'll be praying the court to make an order deducting what belongs to workers monthly from the source in Abuja. We cannot go on like this. Allowing people swear to an oath on the day of their inauguration to comply with the Constitution and all other laws in the country, to then say when it comes to the interest of workers, we are not going to pay. There is no state in Nigeria today that cannot pay more than the minimum wage, because the government removed fuel subsidy last year and told Nigerians, President Tinubu, that the money made from that policy shall be.
Oh dear. Oh boy.
We use the money to live a prodigal life, as it is the case today.
All right, let us say, okay, if I may throw in this question, because we're having technical connection issues from there. What if government fails and Labour decides to go on strike, and sometimes we see what government can do in terms of using legislation. Can government stop labor from going on strike? And what should be the premise?
The government cannot stop labor from going on strike. In any country, you cannot stop a people from demanding from the government what belongs to them. The government may rush to court to get a temporary court order. Once that case is concluded, labor has a right to embark on a strike. And I have read the letter of the Honorable Attorney General. These laws cited were enacted under a military junta. So a lot of those provisions are no longer in consonance with the provisions of the Constitution, particularly Chapter 4, that guarantees the right of workers to belong to trade unions of their choice for the protection of their interest. So if we're embarking on a protest to protect our economic interests and to make a point that starvation wages can no longer be paid in the country, you cannot say that is an illegal act.
Right. Well, Senior Advocate, quite a number of issues really, and I wonder if this also concerns essential services, hospitals, the power sector, because the power was cut as well. Some have even added aviation. Should they be included in that strike as well, as we're seeing?
Yes. Unfortunately, again, as I said, this strike ought to have been prevented. Apart from the provisions of the law, we also signed an agreement to the effect that within a month, that was last year, all negotiations regarding the minimum wage will be concluded. So we shouldn't have this strike. Unfortunately, the biting effect of the strike was fed by Nigerians.
Right.
And as usual, by the poor, much more than the rich. And I am conscious, and I'm aware that that will be seriously considered by the labor leaders this morning during their meeting. But they got calls, even from their members who expressed concern with respect.
Well, we can't say the connection has gone on strike, shall we?
Maybe if the strike is going to continue, there may be certain exceptions.
Right.
But I'm aware that this matter will be seriously considered during the meeting this month.
Well, Senior Advocate, we're grateful we're able to have you in spite of the connection challenges. Thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking with Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, a man who is well aware of the interplay between government, labor, and not forget the private sector as well. They're also involved in this back and forth. Thank you so much for your time. Learn Seal.
Thank you very much. The internet connection challenge was from your end. Thank you.
We'll take this to court, Senior Advocate. We have to sort this out because we have impeccable internet. Well, we'll go to break now, and when we return, we'll talk about the economy of this. So, can they pay, can they not pay? Where will they get the money from? We're digging deep into the budget, ladies and gentlemen, to see where that money will come from. So stay with us.